Okay, thank you everybody for joining in this month's webinar. We're going to talk about minerals, individual minerals, what their role is in the body, and then a little bit on the two performance products that we have, our Total Performance and the Total Performance Plus, kind of the difference there, and some other little bits, some selling tools for those. So I think we're going to just jump right in. And first mineral we're going to talk about is iron. Now, iron is readily available in the horse's diet already. They're going to get it from fresh green grass. They're going to get it out of forage, hay. It's going to be attached to in a lot of our grains. So the horse gets a lot of iron already in its diet, so I don't look at adding a lot of extra iron, and there's some reasons why. But I think why iron gets such a lot of airplay, especially in our faster moving animals, our barrel racing, thoroughbred, standardbred groups, anything that needs to go quickly, even racing quarter horses. We hear a lot about, oh, well, I want to increase their oxygen carrying capacity. I'm going to feed an iron supplement. It's going to give them more stamina and make them go faster. Well, that is because iron is a big part of heme, and we know that hemoglobin is blood and in blood, and we know that heme part of it is the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, and iron plays a huge role there. So in one's mind, we think, okay, well, if we give them more iron, we can increase their oxygen carrying capacity. Not quite. Iron deficiency is very, very rare in horses, unless they've got some kind of internal issue where they're bleeding a lot, undiagnosed ulcers where they're also colicking because they're bleeding a lot internally. Then they're not going to have any iron deficiency. It's efficiently absorbed at low levels of intake, but here's the kicker. Iron absorption is decreased as iron intake increases. So for all of you that are feeding red cell or any of those high iron supplements, your horse is excreting it because absorption goes down. It's not doing anything. It sounds cool, but it's not working. Research has failed to show that an increase in hemoglobin, packed cell volume, or serum iron when ponies were fed really high levels of iron. Why? Because the absorption is decreased. The horse is very good at kind of stabilizing in its blood what it needs, and it will excrete what it doesn't need, and it will slow down absorption if you start to feed it too much and it doesn't actually need it. Iron oxide is very poorly absorbed. Iron is also lost in sweat. So you think, well, our horses are exercising heavily in the summertime. We need to make sure that we're feeding them extra iron. But really we don't, because as I said, their regular diet has a lot of iron in it already. Manganese. Manganese is important in bone formation, in the formation of chondroitin sulfate. Any of you that were on our last webinar where we talked about cartilage and bone development in those young horses, we talked all about chondroitin sulfate and the roles that it played in the joint. So manganese is important for the formation of chondroitin sulfate. So when is that important for a performance horse? Because a performance horse should be mature? No, we have this huge group, and it doesn't matter what discipline, but we're starting horses younger. We're racing horses. It used to be, well, race horses were the only young horses that were still actively growing and expected to perform at the same time. But now we also have futurity or young horse classes in Western disciplines, in English disciplines. We've got young horses expected to do high-level dressage moves or jumping, or any of your Western disciplines. So we're expecting our horses to perform at a very young age. They're still actively growing. Excuse me a minute. And we need to support that growth as well as that performance. So if you've got young horses, they really need to be on something like the Total Performance or the Total Performance Plus, because we need to make sure that not only are we giving them minerals for performance, but also minerals for growth, because they're doing both. Manganese is also important in energy metabolism, protein metabolism, and fat metabolism. So any way that a horse would get energy, whether it's from carbohydrates, protein, or fat, manganese is going to be involved in the breakdown of those nutrients and the biochemical pathways that turn them into energy. So one might look at this slide and say, well, I don't want my horse to be crazy. I'm not going to feed him manganese. No, this is not going to make your horse faster or hotter or give it more stamina. This is normal for daily life and just sustaining, that we break down carbs and protein and fat. Very little manganese is actually lost in sweat. But you will remember another product that we have, CMZ paste, copper, manganese, and zinc, before that young horse. So it's really an important ingredient. Selenium. Selenium is an antioxidant. We talk about antioxidants all the time, but what is an antioxidant? Well, when we talk about exercise, for example, and there are lots of different systems in the body that create these byproducts, but we're going to talk about exercise. Exercise takes oxygen to the tissues. So when you're exercising, you're breathing in a lot of oxygen. You're pushing that oxygen to the muscles so that they can perform. This oxygen is also going into the energy pathways, and we're going to get these oxidized substrates. So when we use this aerobic exercise, we're going to create, so that means using oxygen, create these reactive oxygen byproducts. And they're waste products, and they're going to cause damage and inflammation, and we want to get them out of there. Selenium is an antioxidant. So these are oxidants, these reactive oxidant species. We want to get those out. And selenium is a key player, along with things like vitamin E, removing those waste products. Selenium is also really important for the immune system, thyroid function. So thyroid function is going to control hormones, which also controls metabolism and reproductive function. If you don't have a healthy horse, then we don't even need to go and look at performance, because performance is going to be lacking if your horse doesn't have a good, healthy immune system. But selenium is really important in muscle function as well. Muscle function is really important for a performance horse. Do we need large quantities of selenium? No, there are ideal amounts of selenium, and organic selenium is better than inorganic selenium. Why? Because it stays in the body longer and it's safer to feed. We don't get as many, we don't get these issues with toxicities as readily when we're feeding organic selenium versus inorganic selenium. Iodine. Now, iodine can go both ways, just kind of like selenium. The signs of deficiency and the signs of toxicity with selenium and iodine are the same for deficiency as they are for toxicity. So when a horse is deficient or toxic in selenium, first thing most people will know is we get hair loss. Then we'll start to get hoof issues. Then as it progresses, you may even see bleeding out of the coronet band. Thyroid hormone synthesis comes from your iodine. Iodine is responsible, also helps with muscle function. In the nervous system, it's a new one, respiratory system, cardiovascular system. There really aren't a lot of other systems in the horse's body, so iodine is really critical. Does that mean we need to go out and buy our own iodine and be putting it in the feed? No. Iodine is in forages. I recommend that you feed a plain white iodized salt block to your horses, and that will ensure they're getting plenty of iodine. If you feed too much iodine, you're going to have issues with hair loss, poor coat. They'll get lethargic, won't be able to thermoregulate. Their immune system will go down, so they'll be more likely to get disease. And then iodine deficient or toxic mares also tend to give birth to stillborn or weak foals. So it really affects reproduction as well. I always steer clear of any products that contain seaweed. Not algae, but seaweed, kelp meal, seaweed meal. Why? Because iodine, as we know, is very high in kelp or seaweed. And in those supplements, the iodine values can be very wide and can be really high, can be really low, but they're very variable. So I will never formulate a product that has seaweed or kelp in it, and I always steer clear of those types of products or products that include those ingredients. Zinc. Zinc also has a role in our protein and carbohydrate metabolism. Very important in bone development. Also very important for skin and hoof. Remember, the hoof is just hard hair. It also can have a role in glucose and insulin dynamics. If you're zinc deficient, you can have low insulin and reduced glucose tolerance. So for our fat metabolic horses, again, we need to make sure they've got a balanced diet. So when people say, well, I'm going to take all of the grain away, sure, take the true grain away, the corn, the oats, the barley, the molasses, but you have to make sure these horses are still getting a vitamin and mineral supplement. Why? Because these minerals are really important for maintaining proper regulation of glucose and insulin. Your zinc, copper, manganese, and cobalt in our products are all going to be in a chelated form. It's going to be a chelated form, which means we're attaching a carrier, a protein, to help them be more readily available. You say, well, why wouldn't we put chelated calcium or iron? Because those are already very readily available and really absorbable in their current form. But copper, zinc, manganese, and cobalt really aren't that available in their inorganic form, so we need to make sure that we're supplying those in a chelated form to make them more bioavailable to the horse. What's copper involved with? Connective tissue. So for a performance horse, I mean, I would love to be able to have shown you a video, but when you see a horse exercising, it is phenomenal when you watch in slow-mo the leg path, the leg pattern, and how much the coronet, the pastern, the fetlock all stretch and flex when that horse is exercising. It's amazing how much those lower limb joints really stretch, and that's all good connective tissue. So it's really important for that performance horse that we have good, strong, healthy connective tissue. Watch a barrel racing horse in slow motion, the way they go around those barrels, the angle of those joints. It's really important that you have strong connective tissue. Otherwise, your horse is literally just going to fall apart. Metabolism of iron. Too much iron in the diet can interfere with the uptake of copper, zinc, other minerals, but also copper is has a role in the metabolism of iron. Also for energy production, and then this melanin. A lot of your coat supplements are going to have copper in them. Why? If we're wanting to enhance the horse's color, really bring out the true potential of the horse, then there are skin pigmentation factors like melanin that play a huge role in that, and copper is involved in the formation of melanin. So we really can have that in coat conditioning supplements. Calcium. Well, we know that calcium has a huge relationship to phosphorus, and it's involved in bone metabolism. But what about muscle function, nerve function? You would be surprised the amount of times that if somebody says, well, you know, my horse has been having a lot of unexplained back issues. I've had the chiropractor, I've had the acupuncturist, I've had the vet. Everybody's come out and nobody can explain it. We've looked at the saddle, we've done everything, and I look at the diet and the diet's not balanced and maybe calcium and phosphorus is out of whack. Calcium has a huge role in muscle function and also in nerve function. You know, if your horse is in pain, you need to make sure that your calcium phosphorus is balanced. Now, we know that calcium and phosphorus have a relationship. You always want more calcium than phosphorus. 2 to 1 is the ideal ratio. You can go as high as 5 to 1 in a growing horse and 6 to 1 in a mature horse of calcium to phosphorus, but you never want to see phosphorus higher than calcium. Phosphorus, same things as calcium in metabolism and energy metabolism and bone metabolism. But the other thing, it helps with electrolyte balance, with the acidity in the body, and it also helps to form the backbone of DNA. Well, you are all just DNA, so it's really, really important there. Magnesium, muscle contraction, nerve impulses, energy metabolism, bones. You know, not any one of these minerals is more important than the other. They all have roles, be it small or large, in every system in the body. And even if it's a small role, it's still an important role. So it's really important that we're supplying these minerals and that we make sure, even if your horse is doing fine just eating pasture and his body weight is good, that they're still getting a vitamin and mineral supplement, because we know that forages are low in things like copper, zinc, selenium, sometimes magnesium, and sometimes even phosphorus, depending on the fertilization. Vitamin E, not a mineral, but I figured we may as well talk about some of the vitamins. It's fat soluble, which means it's stored in the fat. So think about a horse in the wild. There's not a lot of forage available in the winter, and it's a bit limited in the summer too. So what we do as the horse is our body weight fluctuates as well, but we eat a lot of green grass in the spring and the fall. In the fall, we absorb all that vitamin E stored in the fat, and then throughout the wintertime, we can draw on those stores that are stored in the fat because we're not eating a lot of green grass. And then in the springtime, we're doing the same thing. We're replenishing our vitamin E by eating fresh green grass so that in the summertime, when maybe the grass is a bit drier, less abundant, then we can again draw on those fat stores. You can overdo vitamin E. If you're feeding more than 10,000 IUs a day, it starts to interfere with vitamin A uptake. Vitamin A is another fat-soluble vitamin. But because of the way we manage horses today, we have a real epidemic with low vitamin E because most horses don't eat plenty of fresh green grass. They're stuck in stalls and they eat stored forages. So another antioxidant, we talked about antioxidants and how they're going to take those waste products formed by the utilization of oxygen in the body, which is needed for life, and they're going to get rid of those waste products. Cell membranes, the flexibility of the cell wall, immune function, muscle function. Vitamin E, or alpha tocopherol, as it's found in nature, is abundant in lush green pastures, particularly in alfalfa, and diminishes with maturation. So as your forages are dried and stored, they're going to lose vitamin A and vitamin E. Well, decreased vitamin E, again, just like that calcium status, I get a lot of people, the horses are deficient in vitamin E, and they're noticing undiagnosed muscle issues, unexplained muscle issues in the horse. And oftentimes it's due to decreased vitamin E. When you look on a label, I want you to be looking for D alpha tocopherol. So there'll be a D in front of the words alpha tocopherol. That is natural vitamin E. If you see DL, that is synthetic vitamin E. So if you see an L, it's synthetic. Just a D, it's natural. So DL synthetic, D natural. Okay? We have changed the DAC formulas to be 100% natural vitamin E, and in the oil, we have a very large quantity of natural vitamin E, 4,000 IUs per pound. Natural vitamin E is better utilized than synthetic. We've talked about that. I figured I'd throw this graph in here because the Nutrient Requirements Council, the NRC, which is the basic, requirements for horses to avoid sickness and disease. Not to be healthy and perform well, but to avoid sickness and disease. So the requirements to be performing and to be really healthy are higher than that. In foals or yearlings, if they're eating lush grass or out at the field, they don't really need any supplemental extra vitamin E. But if they're eating stored forages, they're not eating any grass, then they should be getting about 500 to 1,000 IUs a day. Working horses, depending on the level of exercise they're doing, and this isn't saying that they're deficient, that this is just natural requirements, 2 to 4. Now, if we've got deficiencies, I'm going to go up to around anywhere between 5 and 8,000 IUs. Pregnant mares, 2 to 4, and then stallions around 1 to 2,000. This is assuming they're eating a lot of stored forages, and that's IUs per day. B vitamins. Now, there is a whole slew of B vitamins. They are water soluble, so it's a lot harder to overdose a horse on B vitamins because they're water soluble. They're not stored in the fat. They're just excreted if you don't need them. No chemical digestion needed. They travel freely in the blood. They can be synthesized by the microbes in the hindgut of the horse. B1, thiamine. Important for carbohydrate metabolism. Heavy sweating and work increases the demand for B1. Required on a daily basis, helps maintain appetite. High concentrations in cereal grains and cereal byproducts is synthesized by the microbes in the hindgut when they're breaking down fiber, but not sufficient to avoid deficiency if your horse is really heavily exercising. So B vitamins are a good addition. B2 or riboflavin, again, a lot of B vitamins are really important in metabolism of different energy substrates, whether it be carbohydrates, fats, or proteins. B2 or riboflavin also is really important in your mucous membrane. So think about in your nose, in your mouth, in your eyes, in your intestinal tract, the integrity of skin. High concentrations in our legumes like alfalfa and grass hay. So really not necessarily needed to be supplemented unless your horse is really not eating a lot of forage or has some hindgut issues. B3 or niacin, again, needed on a daily basis, metabolism of energy substrates, really important in red blood cell formation. So, when we look at those blood building supplements that are going to have iron, they're also going to have a lot of B vitamins. Now, I like the B vitamins. I'm not too fussed on the extra iron because, as I said, we don't need the extra iron. Lot of niacin in cereal grains, but it's not accessible to the horse. But it can be produced by the microbes in the hindgut when they're breaking down fiber. B5 or pantothenic acid plays a role in, now we're getting into hormones and neurotransmitters and also blood development. Also energy development, energy substrate breakdown. Cereal grains don't have a lot. So if you've got a horse that's eating a high grain diet that's not getting a lot of forage or maybe have a stressed hindgut, then B5 is important. Also for nerve function and skin and coat condition. Pyridoxine or B6, normal nerve function, energy metabolism, synthesized by microbes in the hindgut just fine, so not really required to feed. B9 or folic acid, it's needed for DNA synthesis to make all new cells. Every pregnant woman when she takes a prenatal vitamin, those prenatal vitamins are required to have folic acid. Why? Because of this DNA synthesis, and all we're doing when we're making a baby is making new cells. So we need to have that folic acid. Otherwise, we're going to have developmental issues. Plays a role also in protein synthesis, breaks down particular amino acids, helps, it's activated by B12. If you don't have enough folic acid, your GI tract, the intestinal integrity of the intestinal cells will also break down. High concentrations in forages, fresh grass, moderate in your hays, and lower in grains. But the hindguts and the microbes in the hindgut produce B9 or folic acid, unlike in people where we need to take it extra. B12 or cyanocobalamin. We need this in conjunction with our folic acid. They work together kind of like calcium and phosphorus, or zinc and copper. It's red blood cell production, and made by the microbes in the hindgut. Biotin, the one we talk about a lot, B7. Naturally in many feedstuffs commonly fed to horses, oats, your soy, which is, your legumes. But most horses get their biotin from those microbes in the hindgut that are breaking it down. When we think about hoof quality, first thing we think about is biotin. Oh my gosh, we need to feed biotin because it's going to improve hoof quality. Well, zinc, methionine, and iodine also have just as much role in hoof quality. So it's really important that you have all of those. Energy metabolism, important for deficiencies, obviously poor hoof quality, synthesized by microbes in the hindgut, and it's a B vitamin, so it's water soluble. Don't look at the total performance or the total performance plus and think, oh, it's got biotin in it. My horse has terrible feet. Now there's biotin in its diet. There is a minimal amount in the total performance and the total performance plus. What is it? 59 milligrams per pound. So in 1 ounce, you're going to get 3.5 milligrams. So let's say we're feeding 3 ounces a day. If you're feeding 2, you're going to get 7 milligrams. If you're feeding 3, you're going to get around 10 milligrams a day, and you really need 20. You can see from this chart that was done a long time ago. 1998 doesn't sound that long ago, but it was a long time ago. The more forages, so this first number down here, we've got forage to concentrate ratio. Let's say we're feeding like an 80-20 forage to concentrate diet to our horse. 70-30, 50-50. That's an outlier there, but let's say 20-80 in the inverse, where we're doing forage is only 20%, grain is 80%. You can see the more forage we're feeding, the more biotin we're creating, because it's a function of when those bacteria are breaking down that fiber. So if your horse doesn't have the best quality feed, first thing to do is evaluate your fiber, make sure they're getting plenty of fiber, and make sure you're feeding a probiotic that's going to help them break down that fiber. That's the first place to start. See how that goes before you start bursting into buying hoof supplements. The amount of people that tell us just by adding the DAC digestive feed additive, or the DDA, it improved hoof quality, hair quality, overall performance. It's amazing, just because you're unlocking more nutrients, you're enabling that horse to get more out of what you're already feeding them. Only horses that would really be deficient in vitamin B, horses on a low roughage diet, horses under a lot of stress, a lot of race horses, because they're number one on a low forage diet, and they're also pretty stressed. So that hind gut is really not working very well. Or if they've gone through some kind of hind gut insult, colic from, grain overload, starch overload, whatever, if they've had diarrhea for any reason, any kind of high parasite load, toxins, or long-term use of antibiotics, because it's going to kill all those bacteria that are creating those B vitamins. So in a lot of your probiotic supplements, you're going to see B vitamins added. Cobalt, another trace mineral found in B vitamins that horses require in tiny amounts. It stabilizes a protein called hypoxia-inducible transcription factors, abbreviated HIF. You're like, wow, this is getting too complicated. What is she doing? It helps to stimulate the gene for erythropoietin, EPO. Again, we're getting back to this red blood cell production and blood doping thing. So the theory is high levels of dietary cobalt could actually increase cardiovascular, your blood carrying capacity. But if you give really high levels, it can horses, I don't know why that's cut off there. It can cause horses to have heart and lung issues. In humans, it's also been seen to increase the risk of cancer. In the racing industry, high levels of cobalt is banned. Vitamin A, another antioxidant responsible for vision, reproduction, and immune function, and it's fat soluble as well. So if these horses are eating plenty of green grass, they're going to get a lot of vitamin A. As the hay is stored longer and longer and longer, it loses vitamin A. Pregnant brood mares have an increased vitamin A requirement, so our Breeder's Choice Plus has extra vitamin A. Vitamin D, it's actually a hormone, and adequate sunlight results in the production of sufficient vitamin D from that. I'm not even going to attempt to say it, in the skin. So if your horse is outside getting plenty of sunlight, they're going to have enough vitamin D because they're converting that dehydrocholesterol in the skin to vitamin D. It's really important for calcium and phosphorus to be absorbed. So if you've got, let's say we have a little a foal born in January, and it's really cold, and maybe he was born with some issues anyway, so we're keeping him in a stall. If we don't get him out in some sunlight or give him extra vitamin D, we could have some further serious issues with calcium and phosphorus absorption. Restricting the amount of turnout for performance horses to less than 2 hours a day prevents their bodies from having time to convert sufficient vitamin D. So, if we're prepping halter horses or horses and they're really staying in the barn and maybe they only go out into a covered arena, so they're really not getting a lot of sunlight, then you need to be supplying extra vitamin D in the diet. Vitamin K, responsible for blood clotting. It actually gets its name because I think it's like Danish or something. They spell coagulation with a K, and because it's important in blood coagulation, they call it vitamin K. Important for bone metabolism. It's also fat soluble. The other thing is, it's rare for horses to be deficient in vitamin K. It's actually never been reported. Potassium, it's an electrolyte, so we won't talk about it a lot here because we're not really supplying a bunch of potassium in the Total Performance or the Total Performance Plus or even in the DAC Orange. You're going to get it mainly from our electrolyte, the DAC electrolyte paste or electrolyte powder. But if you have horses that have HYPP and you're concerned about potassium content, it's 0.98% in Total Performance and slightly less in the Total Performance Plus. Put it in perspective. Average potassium in alfalfa is 2.3%, and you're going to feed about 10 pounds of alfalfa a day. You're going to maybe feed 3 ounces of Total Performance or Total Performance Plus. Average potassium in Bermuda grass hay is about 1.6, and the average potassium in oats is 0.5%. So, this value here could be 10%, and because you're only feeding 2 or 3 ounces, it's still supplying a minimal amount of potassium to the actual diet. But it's important for nerve function and muscle function. So, Total Performance Plus, totally fine to feed any horse with HYPP. Now, I want to touch on labels for a second because people are, well, you don't have that on your label, so it's not in there. Why aren't we putting this on the label? AFCO, the American Association of Feed Control Officers, is who works with the FDA, who works with the government, the USDA. They tell us what we are required to put on our labels. So if it's a feed, your purine and neutrina, blah, blah, blah. You have to put, no matter what it is, you have to put the nutrients on there that pertain, that are most important for whatever you're trying to do. So if it's a feed, it has to have crude protein, crude fat, crude fiber, a min and max for calcium, a minimum for phosphorus, a minimum for copper, selenium, zinc, and vitamin A. That's it. That is all that is required to put on the tag. If it's a mineral supplement, like we're talking about, Total Performance or Total Performance Plus, you don't have to write crude protein, fat, or fiber, because really, are they important in a mineral supplement? No, they're not important. They're minimal. You're not getting enough protein to really do anything, or fat or fiber. So you aren't required to put those on the tag, but you are required in a mineral supplement to put the things that are most important. So min and max for calcium, minimum for phosphorus, min and max for salt, minimum guarantee for, well, that's sodium if you're not doing your salt there, copper, selenium, zinc, and vitamin A. Would be set up like this. These are the things that you're required to have on a label. So if you don't see biotin or vitamin E, doesn't mean it's not there. Look in your ingredients. This is where you have to have every single thing that's in the product must be in the ingredient statement in its form. So manganese oxide, magnesium oxide, they are inorganic minerals. Calcium carbonate, dical phosphorus. That's where you're going to find everything that's actually in your feed. So now let's look at a diet here. People will say, can you really balance a diet with just the DAC minerals? Yes, you can. So let's say we've got a 1,000-pound horse. We're doing heavy exercise. I'm going to feed him some alfalfa because I want to get some more protein into him because he's doing heavy exercise. So I'm going to give him 10 pounds of alfalfa and 10 pounds of orchard grass. So that's giving him 2% of his body weight. That's great, coming from fiber. I'm going to give him 6 pounds of oats for some extra energy. Now I'm going to give him 3 scoops of Total Performance. Total Performance is pink. So the goal with this picture is all of the bars should touch that red line. That red line is showing us that 100% of the energy, crude protein, calcium, phosphorus, copper, zinc, selenium, manganese, iodine, lysine, vitamin A, and vitamin E. If you touch the red line, it means 100% of what the horse needs is being met by the diet. If we're over, okay, so this one here, we're feeding this horse 140% of the amount of vitamin E that he needs. Here we're right on 100%. Here we're closer to, let's say, 120% of the energy this horse needs. If I want a horse on a weight loss program, I'm going to make sure that my energy is a little lower. What I want to point out is the pink is Total Performance. Pink is Total Performance. So look hard at what Total Performance provides to your horse. Calcium, phosphorus, copper, zinc, selenium, manganese, iodine, vitamin A, and vitamin E. There are other things that it's providing, but what it is not providing, do you see any pink above the energy line? No. Do you see any pink above the crude protein line? No. Lysine? No. Slightly thicker, a tiny bit, but no. Total Performance Plus, racing formula do not provide energy or protein to your horse. I don't care what you've been told, they do not provide energy or protein to your horse. They will not make your horse run faster because it's got more energy in it. Make him run faster because he's healthier, but not because he's got more energy. Okay? This is out of 3 scoops of Total Performance. Let's look at Total Performance Plus. What am I getting that's different out of Total Performance Plus? Really, what the Total Performance Plus is we've added the joint supplement in so that we can simplify people's life and they don't have to be adding a boatload of different supplements. We've added the joint supplement in. But I want to point out, if you're feeding 1 or 2 scoops a day of Total Performance Plus, you're not getting the maintenance dose of Optimum Flex. In order to get the maintenance 1 ounce a day of Optimum Flex, you have to be feeding 3 ounces a day of Total Performance Plus. So here, we've got, these are all lining up. These are all the same. In 3 ounces of Total Performance Plus, you will get out of what you get out of 1 ounce of Optimum Flex. So think about that when you're looking at a person's situation and deciding whether Total Performance Plus is an ideal supplement for them. If they've got their horse on a maintenance amount of Optimum Flex and they're buying Total Performance, then absolutely put them on Total Performance Plus at 3 ounces a day, and it meets the needs. But if they've got horses on, 2 ounces of Total Performance, or they're feeding 1 ounce because they're top dressing a fortified grain, a Purina, Nutrina, whatever, then they're not going to get that maintenance dose of joint supplement. I think Barbara has a really great way of positioning it, is that if you have a person that's starting out wanting to add the joint supplement, they're going to be feeding the 3 ounces a day, but we want to do that little bit of loading of joint supplement first. Buy the Total Performance Plus, get a small bucket of the Optimum Flex so that you can give the extra ounce to load it, and then once you're finished that bucket, you're right on track with the maintenance dose here of Optimum Flex. That is all I have. So we will take questions. I've already got one question. Why is Total Performance so high in selenium? When adding vitamin E and selenium, isn't that too much selenium? Let's go back here. It's not that it's excessively high in selenium. My forages that I've got listed here are probably overestimating the amount of selenium that's in those forages. Typically, we need this product to work with even the worst quality forages. So that's not excessive amounts of selenium, and I want it to be able to work with some lower quality forages as well. And most of our performance horses, as I said, they need a little extra. If you're adding a vitamin E and selenium supplement as well, again, this 100% line here is not horse with muscle issues that's sick. This is just a standard performance horse that's healthy. So if you're adding the vitamin E and selenium, you should be adding it because you have muscle issues. And if you've got muscle issues, then these selenium and vitamin E requirements are different. So that isn't too high. Frisian client working, horses are working hard and can sometimes have difficulty recovering after hard work sessions, exhibiting mainly muscle fatigue and respiratory recovery rate. Currently on orange, E and selenium, DDA, and cool gut. Would they be better off using the Total Performance because of the additional iron? No, they can't use the extra iron, remember. No, let's talk about conditioning of the horses. Let's talk about the weather that they're exercising in. Let's talk about carbohydrates in the diet. Sounds like maybe they're not getting enough carbohydrates in the diet. And we don't have iron listed in the guaranteed analysis on the Orange Superior, but if you look in the product, I'm sure it's in there. On the Orange, sorry. So they're getting plenty of iron out of forage. The Total Performance is not going to make your horse have any more stamina because it's got some iron in it. I would look at the actual diet they're getting. I mean, the Total Performance is designed for the performance horse, so I'd be more inclined to feed them that versus the Orange. But I would be investigating feeding them some more carbohydrates and looking at that. Other questions? No more questions? I'm going to sign off. If you don't ask questions, usually when I say that, people start typing questions. Okay, well, I'm going to stop the recording, and if people have questions after that, we can ask more questions. So thank you, everybody, for joining the webinar.